All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mental Health Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Harrison, and I am eager to introduce my guest today, Jeff Strong. He is an innovator in mental wellness, creating drum beats to provide therapeutic benefits for all kinds of mental health needs, from focus to mood to sleep and cognition. We're going to dive right in. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thanks. Pleasure to
Yeah.
be here.
So let's go back. Tell me how your journey with drum beats started. Where did that all begin for you?
Well, going all the way back, I was a very hyperactive, very impulsive, very uncontrollable child.
Hmm.
Got in a lot of trouble. Um, Elementary school was just horrendous. If I was the kid that was always doing everything wrong, right? And
Mm,
then I discovered the pots and pans in the house, and that helped a bit. And then this was the 70s, and there was back then in the Midwest, there was a really robust music education program. So,
hmm.
what was it, fifth grade? I think it was. I was 10 years old. I applied to play in the band, and all
Hmm.
these kids wanted to play drums. And the
Yeah.
band director is saying, "Hey, now you can't all do the drums because there's too many of you." And I just wouldn't. Nope. So I started, and within 4 years, I was playing professionally. Within 6 years, by the time I was 16, I was playing pretty much full time.
Wow.
Uh, and 18, I was two weeks out of high school. I was full time on the road as a musician, and starting the drumming really got my behaviors under control. I stopped getting into trouble because I had an
Mm,
outlet. And
mhm.
so that was part of it, is just realizing that I could channel some of that behavior in ways that was a little bit more appropriate. But what really did it is when a couple of years after I started touring, I decided I needed to go to school and get an education in music. Um, I knew the path I was on wasn't where I wanted to go. I was touring with groups that weren't really doing anything innovative. I won't tell you
Mm,
the names of these bands, but they were singers who had had their heyday, and I would
mm,
be in the backing band. And as a side musician, you can't really get anywhere. It's almost poverty level income,
mm,
and it's unpredictable. So I decided to go to the Musicians Institute in Los Angeles and really study studio drumming, really get into the world that I didn't have to travel, number one, and I could really
ah,
learn a craft at a high level. And one of the things I had to do as at music school is I had to dig deeply into music theory, which of course you have
mhm,
to do, but drummers don't generally do that. Percussionists in high school, if you're in the percussion program, you're not having to do as much theory because
mhm.
yeah, you're playing mallets a little bit, but you're not playing it enough that you have to worry. So I get to college, and I'm realizing that I'm struggling trying to learn some of the circle of fifths and all this stuff that are just more esoteric. It's not playing, it's all book reading and memorization.
Yeah.
And so I made a deal with myself. My favorite class was sight reading because I wanted to be a studio drummer. And
Oh.
there was this one exercise in sight reading, which was this book called Syncopation by Ted Reed. And what it was is a book full of musical notes, broken 16th notes and eighth notes. So
Mhm.
syncopations, whereas you're not playing downbeats, you're playing split rhythms. And the way you would practice this is you'd play, across the page, left to right, top to bottom. And then my teacher said, well, if you really want to get good at this, start going diagonally, start going in different directions.
Oh, wow.
Because what you're teaching yourself to do is not only recognize very quickly the rhythms that you're seeing and the music you're seeing, but also to read ahead. So your eyes
Mm,
are always scanning 2 to 3 measures ahead of where you're playing. And I said to him, I said, well, okay, this is great. So how fast do I need to play in order to be able to pick up anything when I go to a studio? And he said, well, I guess if you played, march tempo, 120 beats per minute, 16th notes, you'd probably be in pretty good shape. And I took that to heart. I had this little thing called a Dr. Beat, which was a metronome that I could
Mhm.
set the tempo, and then I could set the subdivisions. So it would click off at 120 beats per minute, which is 2 times a second. Click, 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 and then you could fill it in. So I've got this going in my head, and I'm playing the syncopations, and they sound kind of like this.
Oh, I don't think we can hear you. I
So
can't pick that up.
I can't, well, regardless, I'll play these syncopations and they're all broken notes, right? And they're really
Hmm.
quick. And I've got the fill going into my head and I'm playing these. And so at some point I decided that um, rather than do what's the logical thing, which is to study my book theory work and then reward myself with the syncopations, the sight reading, I decided to switch it around and say, okay, reward first, and then I'll go into the book work. And I was shocked that after doing, half an hour of these syncopation exercises, that I could focus. And my grades
Mm.
started going up. And I thought, wow, there's something to this. I put it in the back of my mind, graduated school, went on the road for a decade touring with different groups, taught at the local music store, played in the studio, did all the things that, a working musician would be doing. And that's still stuck in the back of my head. And by then, I also had brought in this uh, drum circle class that I was teaching. It was less of a drum circle
Ah.
class than it was African hand percussion. So it was. I started as a drum circle, and I decided that I was going to teach technique too. Well, one of my students in there happened to be a psychologist at the local music or the local school district that had a very intensive, very elaborate, forward-thinking autism program.
Oh, okay.
And he and I got to talking. And by then I had been playing one-on-one for people kind of in more of a therapeutic context. I'd go to their living rooms and play for them, kind of calm them down. And a friend of mine worked as an aide for a company in Minneapolis that they worked with families with kids with autism, and
Mm.
she worked as an aide in one of the family's houses, and she had me come in to play for this kid, this young 7-year-old girl, and this girl calmed down, and
Hmm.
so the psychologist was talking to me, and he happened to be the school psychologist in this program, and he said, we could see if it would calm down a larger group. You want to come in and do a study?
Hmm.
And so he talked to the program director, and she was so well respected in the state. She was on the board of the State Autism Society. She ran this program, and the school board liked her. And so we presented this to her. She presented it to the school board. We got the consent forms signed by the parents. There was
Yeah.
16 kids in this study. We had them listening to this recording once a day over the course of 8 weeks, and we tracked their anxiety before and after. So what is
Mm.
the anxiety level on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
Play the music. What is it now? And then we did an intake just looking at broad behaviors. And then we did a 4-week follow-up and an 8-week follow-up. And we saw some really astounding results. Most of the time, 80, 90%, I think it was 80, 87, 88, 90, 89% of the time when somebody listened, they calmed down.
Mhm.
So, and then long term, we started seeing some other things. And I thought, well, that's cool. Carl, the psychologist, and I, put the data together, and we were trying to figure out what to do with it. And I took off. I was going to head to Australia to do some research. Um, and then he called me a couple of months later and said, the woman in charge of the program is really excited about what we saw. And she
Mm.
wants you to come speak at the autism conference, the state conference in September. And I said, wow, okay, well, so much for Australia. So I head back. I was at the time here in Santa Fe,
Okay.
um, and headed back to St. Paul. And I hadn't even spoken at that conference yet. I was just put on the billing for it. I was, on the schedule.
Hmm.
And I got a call from a woman who wrote a book called The Autism Treatment Guide. And she said, listen, there's a researcher here in Oregon. His name was Steve Edelson. And he had done the largest research project on an auditory intervention for autism back in the early 90s on a program called
Oh.
Auditory Integration Training.
Hmm.
And he had a conference he did, which was 300 professionals would come in from around the world. These are researchers. And he would present, his research and have other experts come in and talk about their stuff. And he wanted me to come and speak.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I just did one study. I'm a
Yeah.
drummer, right? So I
Uh-huh.
go in and so that gets on his schedule. And before you know it, I'm doing I think I did over 20 conferences that first year in 94 I spoke at.
Wow. Okay.
And over the course of the 90s, I spoke at well over 100 autism conferences, presenting the research we were doing, talking about what I was doing, meeting with families because, a lot of the people who come were families and just really getting to know the landscape. And we ended up developing a program around it, which
Hmm.
became the REI custom program we do now.
Hmm.
It wasn't until 2004 that we really understood a little bit enough about what we were doing. And at that point, my ADHD book was coming out. The first edition of ADHD for Dummies was coming out. I'd done a bunch of research, and we decided at that point that we were going to train providers. Uh,
Hmm.
and we put our first conference together at the end of that year and trained just a few people here in Santa Fe.
Okay.
And then the next year, I think we trained 300 and then 500. And by the time I stopped traveling in 2009, because my daughter was young enough yet that I wanted to be
Mm.
home, I was traveling every weekend. We had trained 2,500 providers in our therapy. And basically what they did was they did the intake, the client care.
Hmm.
Um, and we built a pretty strong network at that point.
So
Um,
you were teaching them to do the drum beats as well, or
no,
no?
we were
They were
them,
just they were supporting that therapeutically?
they were doing the intake primarily,
Okay. Okay.
which was a rating scale we developed, which one of our rating scales ended up becoming used to diagnose um, with quite a few clinics because it's pretty comprehensive.
Mm. Hmm.
There's up to 200 questions in a rating scale. We're looking at, basically just rating behaviors.
Hmm.
Um,
And
and
these are behaviors that indicate what exactly?
well, they're across the board. We cover 10 symptom areas.
Okay.
So we look at anxiety, we look at focus, we look at sleep, we look at sensory processing,
Mm.
and cognition, and so and the rating scale will just simply be like a statement. Has trouble falling asleep, and then you're
Hmm.
rating it as not relevant, slightly relevant, pretty relevant, or very relevant.
Okay.
And so we'll look at an area, for instance, sleep, and we'll ask a series of questions from a bunch of different angles to get an
Hmm.
idea of, what are the characteristics of that person's sleep. And our rating scales are all, the questions are really geared to different age groups. So, we break it down according to groups,
Mm.
age ranges, so that we can filter out. We don't have to ask questions that aren't really relevant. Although sometimes you need to step a little further sideways to get the answers you need. But
Hmm.
and so from there we make our recordings. So our original providers, that's what they did, is they did the intake, they sent it to us. We make the recordings, send them back to them.
Ah,
These were
okay.
CDs back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
So and then 2011 we put the program online
Hmm.
and put the intake process online and the interaction online, which kind of was a challenge because now our providers were not really doing anything.
Mm.
They could follow what was going on, but they weren't doing the intake anymore. They weren't doing the follow up.
Okay.
And Beth, my wife, who's also my business partner, and I took over all that. She
Mm.
does all the client stuff,
Hmm.
and she's really good at connecting with people. I'm not, so I do all the people, the non-people music stuff. It works out
Okay.
perfectly. But
Okay.
yeah, so Yeah, and then we had that on the Strong Institute, and then we put out Brain Shift Radio, which was a streaming music site we launched in 2012,
Hmm.
which has the 7 categories of music for episodic use. So somebody can listen to it. You can listen to a sleep category, for instance, to fall asleep. You can listen to a focus category while you're focusing, a calm
Hmm.
category to calm down, things like this. Um, and then a couple of years ago, we rolled out the new version of Brain Shift Radio to Brain Stim Audio, which was brain stimulation audio kind of. And we put the custom program in there. And so
Okay.
now it's all wrapped up in one place, even though we still have quite a few clients in Strong Institute's custom program. They just don't get the benefit of the extra stuff that BSA has.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated because early on, as you were telling your story, you said you were playing drums for some people and then you started this group. So even back before the group with the psychologist and kind of all of this took off, I'm just really curious. You would go and play for people. Like, how did that even come to be? Because as a studio drummer, I would think you would be more, recording things. And so I'm still fascinated. How did this playing for people and noticing them calming down come to be?
Well, that's a very good question. And it came strangely organically,
Mm,
because that sight reading stuff really stuck in the back of my mind while I was playing as a regular musician. But anybody who knows a regular musician knows that their career is filled with a lot of space.
mm,
There's times when you're not working, there's times when you're not touring, and so you've got to find the only way to make it as a musician is to diversify. And
mhm,
so um, I always, when I was teaching, I taught at a music a store called Newt Coupe, which was the coolest store in Minneapolis. I mean, all
mm.
the Prince went there, Flight Time guys, all the really famous musicians went there. So I taught there, and it was kind of cool. But I also taught at another. It was a lack of a better word. I don't want this to sound really weird, but it was a new age bookstore kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I taught there doing the drum circle thing. And one of my early teachers in hand drums also happened to play for his church.
Mm,
And he played one on one for people to help with behaviors because this was part of the church that he was with. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll do the drum circle thing, but if somebody's kind of really stressed out, let me play for them. And then
okay.
there was a place in Minneapolis called Pathways for people with chronic illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I went and volunteered there once a week and played for people who had chronic pain, um, just any kind of chronic illness. And I would just play for them and just see if I could help them calm down. And that's where that started.
Okay.
It was just a way of saying, listen, I need to take my music. I've got time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in this idea of what can this sight reading concept, if somebody didn't want to play the drums, could it have
Yeah.
the same effect focusing wise, for instance, that it had for me while I played? Because
Mm-hmm.
my theory was it was the novelty of it. It was the non-predictable nature of the
Mm.
rhythms that would activate the brain. Because ADHD is characterized by certain parts of the brain kind of shutting down.
Turn off, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can activate those parts of the brain, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people do it through fidgeting. I did it through sight reading. I wonder if hearing the music would do that. And then a friend of mine who was a psychologist turned me on to a study paper called Fidget to Focus. It
Hmm.
was a master's thesis from some student in some unknown college that spread around organically because no one had thought of this. Why
Mm.
is it that kids who have ADHD fidget?
Need to fidget, yeah.
Well, it's because that's the way they focus. Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. Well, so that all kind of wrapped together in my off time. And I kind of just took this idea and kind of ran with it. And
Mm-hmm.
then it became really by the time I did that study at the school, and once I was asked to speak at the first conference, that became my career. I
Hmm.
had no time for anything else. And
Right.
we were selling our first calmings cassette tape on the in the classifieds in the back of the Autism Society of America magazine, starting in
Hmm.
'94, and that also spread the word on what we were doing. But
Yeah. Now, are there other people that do this? Like, or do you train people to do this? This is just it.
this is it. I do have some courses where I teach people how to play therapeutically,
Okay.
and I talk about the neurology of it and all that stuff. But no, I haven't trained anybody else how to play these rhythms because they're bizarre. They're really
Hmm.
strange rhythms because if they're predictable, the brain won't engage.
Interesting.
Even for calm. You would think the calm, when we think about calming music, we think in terms of soothing, right?
Right.
We
Hmm.
find something that's going to make us, relax for, you know, that's not what this is about. This is a neurological calm. It's not a psychological calm. We're trying to shift the brain into a certain brainwave state, which in the case of calm is around 7 to 8 beats per second.
Hmm.
As a drumming rhythm, that's fast. That's the same tempo that my teacher told me I needed to play the syncopation rhythms in order to be a good drummer, to
Hmm.
be a good sight reader. Eight beats per second in the brain is, and this is going to sound mathematical, but it's really not complicated. It's setting a metronome to 120 beats per minute and playing 16th notes,
Okay.
because you're basically playing 8 16th notes every second.
I see.
And so
Yeah.
8 beats for every second puts the brain into an 8 beat per second pulsation, which is called relaxed alert. So we're still outwardly
Mm,
directed, but we are calm.
right.
And on top of that, it creates a synchronization in the brain. Most of the time, our brains are kind of asynchronous. The activity is in one region more than another. It's all based upon the stimulus that we're receiving or the
Hmm.
thoughts we're having. And when you bring somebody into this neurological calm, what you're doing is you're creating a bilateral synchronization in the brain so that both sides of the brain end up being oscillating at the same tempo.
Hmm.
So not only are you bringing the brain into a relaxed brainwave state, you're also creating a kind of continuity across the brain, which creates this relaxed state. And
That's fascinating.
so
Yeah.
if you take that and then you start looking at the other things, now it's a matter of if the brain can respond to that simple concept. It's called brainwave entrainment, by the way. And
Hmm.
there are other people doing that, but they're doing it differently. They're not using drumming rhythms. They're using what's called binaural beats.
Oh, yes, I have heard about that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and binaural beats are basically an interesting phenomenon that you play two different frequencies through headphones. So you play one frequency in the left ear, say 100 and well, let's make this more interesting. Say 400 hertz in the left ear, which is middle A on the keyboard, just slightly below that. And then you say in the right ear you play a slightly different frequency. Say it's a 412 hertz. Let's do the math even easier. Let's say that the left ear is 400 hertz
Hmm.
and the right ear is 408.
Okay.
So now you've got an 8 hertz, 8 cycle per second difference in
Mm.
the frequency that the brain is hearing. And what will happen is the brain will perceive that as a pulsation. You'll actually hear the same beat as you would like a drum beat.
Hmm.
And that's why it's called a binaural beat, because you're hearing binaural frequencies that creates a beat. It's
Hmm.
also called beat frequencies, depending on who you talk to.
Okay.
So that's basic brainwave entrainment. Very, very useful. We use it with drumming because there's a lot of things we can do that binaural beats can't.
Hmm.
But and then if you take the concept of the novelty and the unpredictability, there is another way of doing this, which is two different therapies that actually use frequency modulating pre-recorded music. One is called the Tomatis method,
Hmm.
and the other one is called auditory integration training.
Okay.
And those both come from the Tomatis method, by the way. This both developed by a man named Alfred Tomatis in the 40s. Came with this idea that people don't hear all the frequencies
Mm.
equally. And if you can help fix that, their behaviors will get better. And the theories have changed, but basically what they do is they take classical music and they start filtering it. And they'll
Mhm.
filter frequencies out, and they'll do this in a way that is random. And that creates the novelty that the brain can respond to.
Fascinating. And that makes sense. You're waking up certain parts of the brain to make this all sort of work together, if you will.
Right.
Mm. Mm. Interesting. And then let's talk a little bit about your it seems special interest in ADHD. You have the ADHD for Dummies book 1 and 2 now, to second
First,
edition.
first and second edition, yeah.
Okay.
Because I have ADHD.
Okay.
And that was really the impetus. That came at the same time. I got diagnosed with ADHD at the same time I was playing around with the syncopation stuff.
Hmm.
And so that's partly why I got involved in all that, because I was trying to deal with my own. And I
Mm-hmm.
got diagnosed with ADHD. They put me on medication and I hated it.
Mm.
I could zone in and focus, but I couldn't create. I couldn't improvise.
Ah.
And more than half of what you do as a musician is improvise,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're touring with the kind of guys I toured with. Then you're just reading music that's the same every night. But if I'm in the studio, it's all improvisation. It's all trying to
Mm.
figure out what to do, and that spark was gone. And I thought, no, I can't do this. What else can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Because clearly I have some issues focusing on certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping in mind that ADHD is not necessarily the inability to focus. It's the inability to control how one focuses.
Mm.
So a person with ADHD can focus really well if it's something they're interested in.
Yes.
So, but we can only control so much of what we're interested in.
Right.
So I came up with this little game for myself. I was interested in this syncopation and it helped. So,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know,
That is so fascinating. So, what is next for the Strong Institute for Drum Beats? What do you see in the future?
we're building out brainstimaudio.com. Uh, I my joy, the greatest joy for me is to create the custom recordings for our clients.
Mm.
Each one of those is handmade.
Mhm.
I go in and do it. Um, and all the rest of the music on BSA. And if you've been in and dug around, you're going to notice an awful lot there. And so every week I add a bunch of stuff. This week I added 100 new tracks for
Oh, wow.
what's called ambient instrument. I added 100 of those. Over the last couple of months, I think I've added 500 or 600 more tracks. So that's a lot of my time. I'll keep adding more music.
Mhm.
We'll keep building the infrastructure. The other plan with BSA is right now, um, we, you know, the it's personalized music and custom music. So you can go in and you can go into our personalized section and you can choose a category and intensity based upon, like I want to sleep and I've got insomnia. It'll choose music for you. And then we have our custom, and we still have quite a few providers who are recommending our custom program
Mm.
that we try to loop in on, but they're not necessarily in the loop because there's no place for them to be. So right now, on that app, we're building in a professionals, and kind of a professional admin section, a place they can have an account. They
Okay.
can go into their account and they can see um, what their clients are doing.
Mhm.
They can recommend tracks to clients. So they've got somebody, it doesn't have to be somebody doing the custom program, for instance. This could be a person, a psychotherapist who has their person in there to be able to, fall asleep or calm down. They're not doing the custom, they're just doing the personalized. They can go in and say, hey, I recommend that you listen to this mix,
Mm.
and can put it right in their account. And
Interesting.
they can see the feedback that the custom people are putting in. So it's going to be a portal for professionals to be able to use that as a place to enhance their practices,
Mhm.
aside from the people who are just using it.
I was going to say, but that's part of the beauty is you don't have to be working with a therapist or anything to utilize this and try it out for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So if
Because
people wanted to test this, if they are like, I don't know if this is for me, but maybe, what would be the best way to kind of check that out?
just go to brainstimaudio.com and sign up for free trial.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we have 7-day free trial, and most people can figure out how it's working for them in that amount of time,
Hmm.
and they can explore all the. We have three basic levels of brain stim audio, and one is you can choose from curated playlists, which are hour-long playlists that are designed for specific purposes. The one might be soothe to sleep, for instance, or you know, um, afternoon energy or something like that. Then we have a personalized section, which allows somebody to have personalized mixes chosen for them based upon what they're asking for. And there's 7 categories and there's 5 levels for each of those. So you can go in and choose calm, and you can say I'm agitated, or you can say I'm anxious, or you can say I'm fine, but I'm just a little stressed. And it'll choose an hour worth of music that is appropriate for that.
Hmm.
And you can also go in there and really choose your own by choosing
Hmm.
according to category, intensity, instrument mix, things like this. And then we have sensory processing, which was a buildup of a CD set we had years ago for sensory integration, because a lot of our
Hmm.
providers are occupational therapists.
Okay.
And so that those layers are all available on the free trial.
Okay.
And then there's a custom program, which is not, because that requires intake and personal care. Um, but most people can see what we can do with either the sensory or the regular personalized and curated stuff pretty
That's
easily.
fantastic. Yeah. So we are about out of time, but I'm wondering if you have maybe some final words or inspiration. It sticks out to me that you took something that worked for you and what you needed, and you've made that available to all kinds of people over the years that have seen a benefit. So what would you say to somebody that maybe has an idea or something unique that they want to sort of get out to the world, kind of like you have?
Yeah. Well, number one, I mean, there's nothing that beats persistence.
Mm,
This year marks our 30th year with this company, and I started my research before that. So we've
yeah.
been doing this a very long time. It's taken a lot of shapes and forms over the years. But the biggest one I would suggest is to really allow yourself to ruminate about how to take what you've been taught and to take it your own way. When I started this, like I
Mm,
said, I was teaching, regular drum set stuff, but I also was teaching drum circle, which was what everybody was doing. Everybody wanted to do a drum circle, right? Because that's
mm,
what you and if you played hand drums and you wanted to do something therapeutically, that was the only thing you could do.
mhm,
No one thought you could do anything beyond that. And I was always saying to myself, okay, what is it that really drives me? What sparks my interest? What part of this do I like? And I always came up to the fact that it was being able to play and watch somebody respond. What
mm,
I didn't like was what all drum circles were about, which was to get a bunch of people to play together.
mhm.
There are people I know that are phenomenal at this. I'm not. I don't like the rhythms that we have to play for everybody to play because they're really boring. And I don't have that stage presence to be able to direct people. I am not a leader that way.
Mhm.
And so I took what my personal personality was, which was I was a really good player.
Yeah.
Um, and I liked seeing what I could do with one person.
Mhm.
And so if I were recommending to anybody who's in the healing arts of any sort, is to really look at what that one little piece
Mhm.
that is unique to you, and say, how can I create a path that is even more unique with it? And how can I develop it into a way that becomes my thing? And like you asked earlier, is anybody else doing this? I've trained several thousand people who've gone through our drumming courses
Mhm.
online. And I've, some of those people are fairly decent drummers. Not a single one of them has chosen this path.
Hmm.
And partly because in the course, I say, listen, okay, we're going to find your voice because you're not going to play like me. And yeah, I could
Mm.
teach you these rhythms, but you're not going to play like me, and you're not going to build an infrastructure that I've been able to build. So let's find your voice. And so that would be my recommendation for anybody, whatever style of healing you're doing.
I love that. Find your voice. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time. It is truly inspirational to hear what you've done and your unique journey. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Rachel. It was a pleasure to talk to you.